Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 104. Episode title, Mike Sucks. Mike Sucks. Jeff!
Yeah?
Jeff, get over here. Mike Sucks? This isn't the episode title.
That's it. Yeah, that's right.
I thought this was supposed to be... This was supposed to be episode 2 of Rebuilding the Syrian Culture.
Well, I mean, we could do that instead, but I think Mike Sucks is more appropriate.
Yeah, let's do the Rebuilding the Culture episode part 2 instead of Mike Sucks, because that's not fair.
Oh, it's Michael.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Okay, welcome back to episode 104, where we will not be covering how Michael sucks.
Who are you?
I'm Jeff. And just to be fair, we are recording this Thursday, December 17th.
December 17th.
This is the day that Star Wars is
the official
the preview.
Yeah, the official release date is tomorrow.
And some jerk I know has decided to go, and I can't go, which makes him a villain.
I'll take it.
I can't call him a Sith because those are too cool, but definitely a villain.
So yeah, Jeff wanted to title this episode Mike Sucks because I'm going to see Star Wars in a couple of hours. So
okay,
it should say Michael though. Now we're going to talk about the Syrian culture.
Yep.
If you have been paying attention, last episode we covered part 1.
Mm-hmm.
You want a quick recap? What did we get through?
This would have been much more convenient if I would have had time to do this like back to back. But since I don't, we will blame society. Okay, so before we went over some of the basic beliefs, shared symbolism, and language. And today we are going to go over religion, where we might have a little bit of fun with talking about religion in general. And
I think there'll be a little overlap because I know we talked a little bit about religion last time.
Well, I mean, a lot of it kind of blends in, but there are certain specific things we need to cover. And
okay.
The way I do, I'll cover the way I do common food, drink, and rituals. And obviously there's some rollover with religion as well, too, there.
Mm-hmm.
And then art, music, dress, how I do them. And then we'll probably guess a little bit about just brainstorming.
I'm going to say that slower so people know exactly what you said. He said art, music, and dress. And just so that we're clear, because we didn't say a whole lot of it aloud while we were doing it last time. A lot of the things that Jeff talked about in the last episode, he was actually making it up as he went along. So I wanted to be clear to anyone listening that it was a building exercise. Yes. We might not have been very clear about the structure. Mm-hmm. It almost sounded like Jeff was just telling a story, but he literally was making all that stuff up as he went because the Syrian culture was just a skeletal frame in his storyline, and he's literally creating it while we're going.
Right in front of your ears.
So all of the following is also going to be relatively off the cuff, or you have some of this.
I mean, there's some of it.
You have some decisions made already.
That's in my brain.
Okay.
One, the idea of, let's get into it. Religion. There are certain kinds of things you want to look at when you look at a religion. And there are other things you don't ever want to look at because it could burn your eyes into horrible.
Like the Ark of the Covenant?
Yes, exactly. Because that is the biggest, thing about how religion works is if you look directly into the Ark of the Covenant in any religion, and they exist in all religions.
The Ark of the Covenant or something like it?
No, the Ark of the Covenant specifically.
Okay. All religions believe in the Ark of the Covenant.
All of them have to because that was a good movie.
I don't think that's true, Jeff. I mean,
you're making stuff.
It was a good movie, but I don't think all religions believe in the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay. There are certain things I like to look at specifically for religions. And most people think right away of gods.
Sure.
It's not that simple.
No?
There are various kinds of religions.
I mean, it's a starting point.
It's a starting point. But all religions don't have gods.
True.
And so that's one thing to keep in mind. And if you go back to episode 15, where I kind of go over the framework, those are the things I think you need to have.
To create a religion?
Yeah, at a minimum.
Okay.
There are other things like potentially, like if it's a polytheistic religion, you're going to have gods, at least the name of the gods. And usually, most polytheistic religions, when you have a series of gods, they usually do something as well. So it's like
God jobs.
God jobs. That's right. You know, that'd be a great show. I wonder if they can get the Dirty Jobs guy
Right.
to do it. That would be awesome.
I thought you'd like that one. God jobs.
We'll have to come up with God jobs to make that into the next T-shirt.
That could make a funny animation series.
Yes.
Listeners, someone get on that. God jobs.
God jobs. Get that done.
Copyright Jeff and Michael.
Yeah. Just send us the money, man.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to recover a few of the major premises that are important to the religion. Water is important. Water is the bringer of life. Well, and death.
Yeah. You forget the wording you used about it. Was it just bringer of life?
It was bringer of life and death. So essentially,
I know it was something. Yeah, it was both. It could be both positive or negative depending on circumstance.
On one end, sort of one life springs from there. When we get to the common foods, due to the amount of coastline, you'll see the Siren. There's a lot of seafood consumption, a lot of water consumption. And we'll talk a little bit about that, why, when we get into that area. But also, like, when they're getting whipped by the Bedrachum, the water's what saved them from being totally overrun, at least to the time period at which I'm sort of stopped.
When you say whipped by the Bedrachum, you just mean like when they were getting trashed in combat, not actually like captured and physically whipped.
If they had been caught, there was potential that they would get physically whipped.
Right, but you're referring to them just losing battles and losing land.
Losing massive amounts of land and being basically driven off of the continent onto islands. And also, from a little bit earlier, there were the elves that were talking about, the Mysteritos. The Mysteritos came through the pools of water as well. So there's this idea.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So there's the pool of waters, which brought this horribly tough empire out and threatened them. And then they stopped coming, and then it protected them from the Bedrachum when they came. So there's a mixed relationship of water, as Mike brilliantly put it on the board, is super important.
Michael.
I'm sorry. I was nice to you once this episode.
I guess I guess you're good for the next 2 or 3. When were you nice? Did I miss it? I blinked.
Well, in the beginning, when we were doing Mike sucks thing, and I corrected you.
You were nice to me by saying that Mike sucks?
Well, I correct you by saying it's not Mike, it's Michael.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You did say that. I'm glad we have it on record.
We have it on the record for at least once.
At least once.
Hopefully the audio is not too distorted, and the people listening to this episode aren't like, what's he talking about?
What's going on? I didn't hear that. That was edited
He's
right out.
He's crazy. But then again, after 104 episodes,
104. 104.
And wait,
and
the
that
last
doesn't
episode, he was sort of just telling a story and making up as he went along. Yes. Stories help you remember things. I think in stories. I talk in stories. Mm-hmm. I love stories.
I wonder how many of my stories are factually inaccurate based on time and me putting a flair on recounting stories from my life. I wonder how much of if I could actually see what occurred back, see how false my memory is,
or be able to tell the story and see the overlay of the events. And then right after that, the guy was really mean to me, and
then
it's 2 months later.
And then in the bar fight, I took on 5 guys. So I'll watch the movie Defending Your Life.
Okay. One thought here on religions. Besides polytheism, there's some other major kinds we should talk about just to have them in our heads. There's animism, which is the idea of things are animated. Inanimate objects are animated?
Yes.
So it's it would be if you were Catholic, but you prayed to the piece of metal.
Okay.
The saints.
Or the mountain. Their god is the mountain.
Or it could be some icon, because even within the scope of a religion, you could say Catholicism has multiple levels. Mm-hmm. So Catholicism at its heart or the way people believe in it is monotheistic. There's one God, 3 in 1. It could be polytheistic if the person's intention when they're praying to the Son is to play off the Father, to play off the Holy Ghost. You can end up with that same kind of thing. Or when you include saints, I'm praying to the Virgin Mary because she can get God to do what I need her to. It can actually extend the pantheon to a polytheistic way of interpreting it.
I'm praying to St. Peter. I'm praying to St. Michael.
Or if you pray to that metal to the saint and you believe the power is derived from the metal of the saint, of Saint Bonaventure.
Peter Bonaventure. Yeah, that's a popular one.
I believe that is actually a saint. I was
probably
struggling.
Is.
But if you believe the power in what you're doing is derived from actually the metal, it becomes animism. Then you have monotheism, obviously, which is, this idea that there is one God. And there are many, many other variations. There's actually a neat site. There are several. This is a good Google term. Fantasy religion generators. And kind of click through them because, one, if you don't spend a lot of time studying religion, or even if you do, and you're like, what should I really do with this religion? Even if you don't use what they generate, it'll give you additional things to at least think about when you're developing the culture.
So this is a world building tool.
This is a world building tool.
Say it again.
It is from chaoticshiny.com. And that's, I believe it's spelled correctly, chaoticshiny.com. And then it's /religiongen.php. But I'm sure if you just Google fantasy religion generators, it should come up first because that's how
I imagine there's probably not a lot of them.
There's actually a better one. Actually, there's more than one.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find, I thought it was linked to my old religions episode, but I could not find it.
So if you go to episode 15, you state it in episode 15?
I'm looking at episode 15 right now and I'm not seeing it listed there.
Okay.
So either I put it in a different episode, maybe, I don't know why, but maybe I did. Or maybe I forgot to link it. I'll try and find that one too. That one was very in depth where you could say, I want a polytheistic religion. I want this. I want that. And it would actually sort of build up a framework as a starting point. But some of the neat things that they have listed here is their ideas of things that you need for a religion is symbol, which is something I have in mind. They have holy color on top of that, which could very well be true, but I think that's more of a cultural decision if a color is tied to it. There's something called pass down, and essentially how is it passed down, which is actually a good thing to cover, which I never thought of before.
Well, especially if you're talking about a culture that doesn't have a
and I do,
have
but I don't write
history.
It down.
Yeah,
exactly. Because is it an oral tradition? Do they write it down? How does it get from generation to next? This has.
I wish I remembered everything I did creating the religion for Yasad's culture. Because I know I got very in depth on it, but I don't remember.
You can get very in depth, and there's a lot of things that you can add in here. Like they have listed a creation myth type, and I don't have that listed. I think most religions have those. I'm not sure all can't do or should.
What kind of religion would the Force be? Because there's not a god there; they just believe in an energy.
Well, usually they get accused of stealing off of Eastern religions.
But yeah.
So probably like Taoism.
How could they steal off of a religion when being a Jedi is one?
Well, only now. And you figure since it was from a long, long time ago.
That means the Taoists stole it from Jedi.
They had to time travel to the future.
I don't think that's true.
To steal the Eastern religions to go back in time.
I don't think that's the case. I think that
for us then to look at them and turn that into religion.
I think they came here. Their descendants came here and taught the ancient Eastern religions how to have, the Force-like faith.
Excellent. I'll go with that.
Okay, cool. But what kind of religion would you call that, as opposed to monotheistic or polytheistic? Is there a term for that sort of faith?
Hold on. Yes, there is.
There is, but you don't remember it.
I don't remember.
That's fine. If you find it, we'll get back to it. I don't want to derail your train of thought. Can't type and talk at the same time.
No. Okay. So they have deadly sins. Once again, I think it's a cultural thing. All religions are based off of the culture who develops its moral compass. So whatever the cultural norms are, and the beliefs are, those become essentially, what's important to the religion. So the idealized parts of a religion, things that a society idealizes, are things the religion early on. And over time, as more cultures maybe buy into the religion, it shifts to a greater one based on that religion. But especially if it's strictly tied to one culture, the cultural ideals for good and evil will dictate the religion's good and evil. They will match. They have holy virtues, same thing. Associated art form, whatever.
Yeah. Why is that a whatever?
I don't think that's necessary.
Well, it's not. I think that are you still looking at the generator?
Yeah, I'm looking at the generator.
Well, I think that's a fair thing to throw in there because there's a great deal of art built into religion. I mean, they have to make idols, they have to make pictures, historical accounts, and there's always pictograms, sculptures, paintings, the stained glass murals, mosaics. Like there's all kinds of things.
And most of your early cultures, art will be derived from religious practice. But for me, I push that more into culture because, especially over time, it deviates where
fair enough.
People will build off of a certain type of art. So to me, I that's really why I split culture apart from race and religion, because these things are all slightly deviant from each other. Coming of age, that might or might not be even a religious tenet. So I kind of disagree with that one. Marriage, once again, might or might not be a religious tenet. Death rights, almost definitely a religious tenet. Let's see, major taboo. They have money for theirs. That's bad. Let's see, and how they think of outsiders, and how do they spread their religion? Blah blah blah.
So we're talking about this kind of in a skeletal frame for a builder.
Yeah.
But as you're going through this, are you coming up with ideas do you want to start talking some of this out?
So we're going to start talking right now. So myths to the religion, we talked a little bit about some of those earlier. Actually, we're going to start with Pantheon, I think, because their Pantheon's slightly different than what people think about. The chief god of their Pantheon, which is polytheistic, will vary from region to region. Part of it is because of their own differences, and it might be almost the exact same god.
Yeah, this is you're talking about this last episode when you're saying different tribes will have their own sort of.
Yes.
Is it their own like super god or their own sort of sub god?
Their own chief god of the Pantheon, and essentially.
So they might all worship a different grand poobah.
Yes. However, my thought is because of the religious norms or their cultural norms that it's going to have a tendency to look kind of the same.
Yeah. They might just have a different name for it in each place.
Maybe a different name and maybe a slightly different shift regionally. And all of the gods would probably have slightly different names regionally as well, too. But there's definitely a pantheon beyond the chief god. But those are probably more consistent religion to religion.
Would they acknowledge, let's say for sake of argument, I know they're very...
Because, you want to know why? Because he's the god of this dirt.
Well, right.
Yeah.
But my point, my thing is, okay, that might answer most of what I'm about to say and ask. I know they're very clanistic people. So if I'm from clan A and you're from clan B, there's a strong loyalty to, our respective clans. Let's say for sake of argument, our clans are friendly, friendly-ish. Are there?
Yeah.
There are clans that would be friendly to other clans?
Sure.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Most of them?
Yeah. It's usually the larger and more powerful your clan/tribe becomes, the less friends you have.
Okay.
And there's the sort of natural balancing act in the Syrian culture where if one culture starts becoming too dominant, then the other cultures will
band
other
together,
ones will sort of band together
it.
to screw with them
and
to try and prevent them from taking over. And it was successful as long as they were around.
Okay. So I'm in clan A, you're in clan B, or tribe A, tribe B, however you want to state it. I've got, God Bob, you've got God Robert. Would we acknowledge that, if I happen to be in yours, would I get that, we're kind of worshiping the same dude? Or would it be like, no, my Bob is all about the water over here, and your Bob is about the river over there.
Your water's filth.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So they would acknowledge they'd say, no, it's not the same guy.
Yeah, they don't think it's the same guy.
Okay.
Where in the greater pantheon, there's less truth to that.
Okay.
Because it's the god of the moon. The god of the moon is the god of the moon. The name might shift and might even have completely different sounds in different parts of the country, but it's the same god. The reason the local god, the chief god changes locally is because literally he controls this part of the earth. He's the god that oversees their tribe. So obviously where they are, he rules supreme.
Okay.
And ironically, if they move, he would move with them because he's a very generous and loving god for just their tribe.
He favors us very much.
Yes.
He's everywhere we go. But only where we go.
He's following.
Yeah, he didn't, when we left, Smithtown, he didn't stay in Smithtown. He's not there anymore.
No.
He's right above us. He's right there.
So, there will be some gods based off of mainly, physical signs in the universe. So we're not going to name them all off here. They're not.
Give a couple examples though.
Yeah. So the god of the moon. There'll be a god of the moon, and there will be certain cultural norms associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
The god of the Eastern Sea, the Western Sea, the Northern Sea. There's 3 seas in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at a map, you might go, that looks like one.
Yeah, it's one big piece of water.
But, the world was much smaller when they came up, know, so they see.
So your basic norms, like big bodies of water, maybe a sun god, harvest and that sort of jazz? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Harvest always, because food's important. And because Gardul shifts on its axis, there are seasons.
Do they have, like, when you say it's polytheistic, do they have, like, say, 5 or 6 gods, or do they have, like, tons for, like, every little thing?
They have tons for gods, although in every region they might not recognize all of them. So, like, the ones, like we're saying, the moon.
Okay.
One for each moon, actually.
A given tribe would have roughly, I'm not going to pin you to an exact number, but a given tribe would have roughly how many gods? 10?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably 10 that they kind of look at.
Okay.
They might even think there are a few more that they might have to deal with, but, 10 is on the outside of what they would try and deal with annually.
Okay.
Just because there's only so much time to worship people,
and try
an extra sacrifice here or there because you're afraid that the god of the desert is going to swallow your land because you're in a drought. But actually, they don't know of deserts. So.
And tribe to tribe, that's going to vary. Like maybe 5 would be the core ones that they might not be the same names, but everyone kind of acknowledges the moon gods, the sea gods, the harvest god. But they might have different.
Very, very, they are the same god. They just have different names for them because the language is much more splintered than it is in like the Badrachim culture or in other cultures that end up centralizing. Because they're so decentralized, the sounds slightly evolved over time. And so if place A is 2,000 miles from place B, their words are actually going to sound different.
Small real world comparison. Just look at Christianity.
Yeah.
Go from different places all over the States. People look at Christianity very differently from region to region and from what's the word I'm looking for? A different type of Christianity, like Lutheran, Catholic, Baptist,
Protestant,
denomination. Yep. Different denominations worship differently, and they look at how they look at their faith and their
some
God
really
differently.
Don't like other ones too.
Yeah,
and that would definitely cause tribal tensions if they think that you're sort of heathenistic in your approach, your tribe. That would definitely cause tensions because religion is very important to primitive people. I mean, to modern people too. When you're in a primitive culture, most of your actions are religious. The way you get up in the morning, the way you go to bed at night. These things are dictated probably by your religion. And that's kind of helps differentiate the culture over time. And, later on where your culture becomes a little different than your religion, you might still hold on to some of those from the old days. So now we're going to go to myths. They have a creation myth.
So what do you... Oh, myths within the religion. Yeah. Okay. I thought you meant we were like getting off of religion. I was going to say already?
No. Religion is probably most of this episode because you'll find I'm very brief in the way I do the other ones. Okay. So myths to the religion, important ones are there's a great flood one.
A great
flood one.
Flood. A great flood myth.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not like the one on Earth. It won't be probably that epic, but the idea, once again, the importance of water. So they have to have some kind of great flood myth.
And did this actually occur and they've made a legend out of it, or did it never occur and they just have a myth?
This maybe never occurred. I think this is their creation myth.
Okay.
Essentially, the gods, their god, and the pantheon fought the waters back to expose the land to give people a place to live. So that's the
Do you want me to write that down?
Sure. Yeah. That would be helpful so I can take a picture of it and remember what I'm saying later.
Well, I mean, you don't have this written down yet?
This is not written down, no.
All right. So I'm going to write Great Flood Myth. That works for you?
Mm-hmm. Great Flood Myth, he's saying as he's writing down if you can't hear him. And that is the creation myth of the world. And they are not an apocalyptic religion, so they don't think of there being an end to the world. Whether or not there is irrelevant. They have, what would be other major myths that they have? They would have to have a myth how the sun came about, how the people came about. They have I mean, that's how the land came about, the creation. That's how the creation came about.
How did the people come about? Were
they would
by the gods?
They'd have a different one. Yes, it would be a blood sacrifice one where one of the gods was sacrificed to create the peoples and the animals and the plants and all of the things on the world. Because once again, this culture does believe that blood sacrifices are sometimes necessary. And the gods would sacrifice even one of their own to make the world. And on top of that sacrifice, there's no really ending sacrifice. That probably most of their myths beyond that are stories of heroes and playing out some of the cultural norms we talked about last time. They probably don't have a lot of common myths between them. Those two, I think, are the big ones. Mm-hmm. Besides that, they're stories of heroes, like sort of like your Norse type of epics. Mm-hmm. That idea, King bludgeoned the behemoth.
Are you making that one? Is that a real one?
That's not worth writing down.
Okay. I'm not going to write it down. It sounded ridiculous. You're like darting your eyes around the room like, a guy with a monster and a rock.
Yeah.
So suffice it to say that all the tribes have some heroes in their history.
Yes.
Whether or not, and I'm using the word history with air quotes, like they have
and most of these
legends.
probably were real.
Yes.
The stories around them are probably, the older the story is, the less likely it's accurate.
Yeah, of course.
Because this is obviously an oral tradition.
So long game of telephone.
For a long time, until they were exposed to the elves where they came up with the writing. Common beliefs. Water is wicked good, as we would say in New England.
And you had that written down.
That's written down already.
Yeah, I thought so.
Nighttime, holy rituals should be performed.
I remember that. I remember talking about that. Mm-hmm. Do you need me to write that down? No. Because it's in the prior episode.
There's a picture of that.
That is written down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And night is important because night brings about the day.
I'm totally interrupting your train of thought for half a second. Night brings about the day. Don't forget that. Mm-hmm. For the listener, as an exercise, and I think it's important, just like if you're trying to create stuff like this, to have a notebook with you. Mm-hmm. Like when I was creating stuff, I would always have a notebook at my bedside. And if I had an idea, I would have to write it down because I'll forget it. Same thing that goes for this. If you're listening and you come up with stuff, make sure to write this stuff down and organize it. Even if it's not, like you can organize it later, but get it down. Like Jeff and I will do a show. We'll create stuff. We have a big, huge whiteboard here in the Star Wars studio. The Michael's Going to Star Wars Tonight studio. And we write on the whiteboard. And there was an episode a while back that we kicked ourselves because we erased it and we can't recreate that information. So make sure to record either, typing it into a word processing program or writing it down on a notebook or something so that so you won't forget your ideas and you can organize them for the purposes of creating your religion, your culture, your world, whatever.
Yeah, I'm still looking for the knife in my back here. I can't. I have to get that later, I guess.
I'm sorry. I'm stabbing you in the back because I was smart enough to get a ticket for Star Wars in advance.
Actually, my wife is working tonight, so I can't go to Star Wars if I wanted to.
Well, then you need to blame your wife for that, not me.
I'm not going to blame her. You get it, buddy.
So I should wait until the day you're both available to watch it, for me to watch it, even though we're going to watch it independently of each other, before I can watch it, so that I can't know before you because you're not ready.
I would have said that, but now I'm going to go the day after.
You would want me to go the day after. Well, then, but see, if we did that, then the episode would be called Jeff Sucks.
Yes.
So I know I just told you to remember your thought, and we totally derailed.
Totally derailed me.
Night and day are important? Was that?
Night is important because night is the time of re-energizing. So if you can interrupt your foe's night, you weaken them, and there's some truth to that. And you, if you can protect yourself at night, can be ready for the next day.
How would you interrupt your foe's night without also interrupting your own?
Oh, you would
have to interrupt your own to do it?
Or you would do a sacrifice at night. And once again, you're doing stuff at night, but it's building up the energy because the energy is built up at night.
Okay.
So that's the reason.
So not necessarily going over to their camp and screwing with them. I'm not saying that they would eliminate that, but you're referring to doing some kind of bad mojo sacrifice to throw bad vibes on the enemy during the nighttime.
Because magic's more prevalent at night. Energy, is not suppressed by the sun, which is ironic. Because sun is light is energy. But so they're the way they think is, and they will do their raids at night because of this. Even though, yes, you're right. There's a hypocrisy in the idea that, wait, how can we sleep and raid them? But they'll do it at night because they think the impact of it is greater than if they do it during the day.
Okay.
Now, if they have to perform rituals in the day, let's say there's an emergency, that's typically when they utilize blood and more sentient being sacrifice, we'll say. They'll do those during the day because they need the extra mojo because they're not doing it at night. And so like
during the nighttime, they could get away with sacrificing a goat, but during the day, they'd have to sacrifice a person.
Yeah, little Johnny.
Little Johnny's got to go. It's for the greater good of the tribe, Johnny. I understand.
Exactly. Sorry, Luke.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. Are you trying to imply that you would sacrifice Luke?
At this point, yes. If it would stop you from seeing the movie.
Don't hold your anger at me against Luke. That's not fair.
I'm a bitter, bitter man. But those are some of their major beliefs there. Sort of building on what Mike said earlier, I got distracted by Star Wars.
Michael.
One of the techniques I do when I'm really doing this, and I'm really trying to plug it out, I'm a big planner by Post-it note. So like if I'll start writing down the names of gods on a piece of paper and I'll just start sticking them up. Or it might be the god of the moon or something to signify that. Then I just put on the wall and I drop that and, oh, wait, here's a belief. And so I'll just put them all on the wall unorganized. And then I will look at it and then I'll organize it and I'll go, oh, this is more important than that. And it lets me sort of move it around a lot.
Have you seen Dawn's Post-it system? I don't know if it's hers. I think it's like a writer's system, but she has like 7 different Post-it colors and she plans the book out. And
some people organize their books that way.
It's crazy. Like it's intense to see it. Like her whole wall is just covered in Post-its.
Sure. And that's one way to do it. I come from my Post-it thing more from an agile computer programming technique of the idea of basically playing out a system via Post-it notes. And you're just trying to get the ideas out there and then you can organize them. And this really isn't writing, so it's not the same ultimate effect. I kind of do a Kaven board for writing where it's like, I know which plots I have. I know how I need to move the plots, and I can just kind of keep a Post-it note and I'll move it to where it is. So I can sit there and go, I have 5 chapters left.
Where can I fit this? Yeah.
Or, maybe I should have the hero's last part of the book be the last chapter instead of the villains. I was told that was important.
I like the villains.
I know. Because they're the real hero.
Do you? I think we determined though before that you apply the word hero or villain based on the character you're following.
Yeah.
So if you're following the good guy, then the good guy becomes the hero. If you're following the bad guy becomes the hero.
No.
No?
It's in their relationship to their culture.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or into the primary culture of the book.
To use the words hero and villain, I think I might be thinking of character.
Yeah.
When you're talking about like the main character.
Yeah. And I also call it protagonist and antagonist.
Yeah, that's a better word. That's a better word.
And those can be either heroes or villains.
Of course.
But essentially, it's like there's an orc, which would be considered a bad guy in my book. In his culture, he's a good guy. And he's very good at what he does. And nothing he does is wrong. But the humans hate him because he raids into human lands and steals stuff from humans, occasionally killing them.
Occasionally, when it's necessary or possible, or whenever possible.
Tomato. Yeah.
I had an opportunity. I squashed his head.
He smelled funny.
He smelled funny.
So, common rituals beyond sacrifice, and sacrifice would probably come in two forms: either a strict bloodletting or a garroting. Usually in pools of water, if possible, because the pools of water make it more holy. And be careful stepping into still pools of water in Syrian lands, because you're probably defiling a holy spot.
Okay.
Oh, yes. So still pools of water are holy. Big lakes where you get a lot of waves, no. But small ponds, don't go in them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Should I write that down?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, okay. Were you just making that up?
Well, it made sense. Marriage is important. The union between two people is a religious act for them. There'd be rituals for death. How do you deal with death? And that would also be important. There would be a coming of age for men and women.
I like it.
They are actually a relatively equal culture between the genders. No difference in property rights. No job difference outside of women have to give birth because, well, they have to. And because they're not really a warrior culture, but they're more of a hunting culture that does warrior on the side. Actually, I don't know. They are really a warrior culture, too.
Do you want to call it a coming-of-age ritual or
it's a ritual.
Rite of passage?
It might be called a rite of passage by them, but it's a ritual. Let's see. Those are probably the major rituals they would have, and I'm sure there'd be some other ones out there, too. And a good thing to do if you're looking for rituals to flesh out in depth more a religion, my suggestion would be Google cultural or Google religious rituals. Google rituals and just look at some of them and go, does this make sense? Does it not make sense based on the culture? Or can I modify it to make sense for the culture? But that is Jeff's quick cheat on how to find rituals. Because that is something that does sometimes trip people up. We've covered a lot of the common symbols or common beliefs. Common symbols are they don't have a holy symbol per se, but for them it's the interweaving of the universe. So there are two important things. Blocks, which is what they base their alphabet on, and the blocks will have a weave sequence, much like Celtic knotwork, but they are always in blocks. And so there's some Celtic block thing, which is, the way they would let you know it's a holy site. And of course, if you're not from their culture, you would not know. So you would step in the pool and then they'd have to kill you. Because that's the only way to cleanse a pool you've stepped into. They don't have chlorine. They don't know about it. Common stories, not going to really get into those per se, but that kind of goes back to myths. That's they have a lot of stories about heroes, people who made a difference coming up, all the way back in time. Some are real, some are fictional. Some of the stories are kind of realistic to what happened, and some are really, off
fantasized.
Well, King Jermagan, he really he beat everyone and beat them up, and he was the greatest king ever, and he never won a battle.
He could crush a man's skull with a bare hand.
And he was over 6 inches tall. He was actually the world's shortest man, but really strong, I guess.
Well, if that William Wallace was here, he could just turn around and fire to the English.
That's right. Possible belief in the supernatural? Yes. Everything is supernatural. The supernatural happens all around you. The question is, can you interact with it? And most people cannot. So there's a scariness to shadows. There's a scariness to the change in content of anything because it's a possible supernatural interaction.
So does that mean like even the most mundane things, they apply a supernatural power to it or occurrence to it?
There could be. It's worth exploring. If anything unknown happens, they will start determining whether or not it was a supernatural cause.
Okay. So anything unknown could be supernatural.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they will have their own sort of supernatural creatures, fairy kinds of creatures and monsters. And so specific known things might also be considered supernatural, whether or not they happened from a supernatural being. And some of the supernatural beings do exist and some do not because it's a fantasy world. Woohoo! And now salvation. This is what I always put as an optional. Religion does not have to lead you to salvation. Sometimes religion leads you strictly to death and you consider yourself lucky. Like in ancient Sumeria, when you died, you had the great privilege of nothing happening to you. You were not sent to afterlife. This is only if you're good. You weren't sent to afterlife. If you were bad, you went to the afterlife. And that was even worse than Earth.
So if you went to the afterlife, was there any way to get out of it? Or that was
I don't know enough about Sumerian religion, but all I know is the supernatural or the afterlife was held for those who were very bad. And it was not meant as it was not heaven, and hell maybe has its origins in the stories of what we think of it from there. Mm-hmm. So salvation, I think they do. I think they have a salvation, a happy hunting grounds kind of place. Yeah, just checked out Happy Hunting Grounds up there. They're going to have a Happy Hunting Grounds.
I missed the statement prior to that.
Salvation.
Okay.
So if you die and you're good, you get to go to the Happy Hunting Grounds. If you die, you come back to Earth because Earth is hell.
Should I, instead of using the word salvation, do you want me to write post-death good?
If you put salvation and then dash Happy Hunting Grounds,
you'll know.
Yeah. Essentially a place of plenty where you can go and hunt and you don't have to fight people. You don't have to take things.
Coming back to Earth, how do you want that worded? I realize it's a reincarnation. Yeah. But it seems to me what's more important is the reasoning for the reincarnation.
Because Earth sucks.
Why would I be reincarnated?
Because of evil acts against the cultural/religious norms.
Okay.
Essentially, there's only bad karma. If it builds up, you're done. So that is really all for religion. We're going to move on now to common food and drink. Now, my thing is, yes, it is Gardual, not Earth. Thank you. I don't believe in overthinking common food and drink when I'm building a culture. That's something that happens for me as I'm going through.
Unless you want to make food.
And you might have specific ideas that are important.
Like obviously there are cultures that are much more heavily, like food is a bigger thing to them. But other cultures, food is like, meh.
I might point that out if food is really important to the culture beyond the survival point. Mm-hmm. And then to the religion. And this religion, not so much. But the common food drink in this religion or in this culture is basically a water-based diet, and not the drinking so much, but they prefer to eat animals that were in water, not animals from the ground. Mm-hmm. It's not always possible.
So a lot of fish.
Yeah. So a lot of fish.
Is there a crustacean type?
Yeah, there's crustacean types of things, and anything from the water is fine. Mm-hmm. You don't drink the water, because once again, water could be good or bad. So you have to do something to the water. So you get to a fermentation process to modify the water or milk or some other substance. You don't drink straight water because remember, water can bring you either life or death.
That seems kind of
counterintuitive.
That's exactly the word I was going to go with, because but naturally remember, you want to drink
religions
water.
And cultures almost always have built-in hypocrisies.
I know that, but fighting one's own nature. Like, what if you are, for sake of argument, you've got this dude who is, been traveling. He's been walking through an area that's arid, and he's run out of his water, and he hasn't come across water. He's at the point where he's almost going to die. Then he comes across water, and it's the only water he's seen in days. And if he doesn't drink, he's going to die. So
if he's a true believer,
he won't drink it.
If he's a true believer and he's not led a good life, he might not drink it.
If he's a true believer and has not
led a good life,
he might recognize that, and by repenting, just say, I won't drink this.
And not take on more bad karma. Other people, most people would probably go, yeah, here we go. And it's not so much because it's a good or bad thing, but water could bring life or death. So the problem with drinking straight water is it bringing you life or death at that moment?
Gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah, desperation will tend to people drinking water. Like I said, some people, depending on their specific beliefs, might choose not to.
What kind of thing would they do to the water so it's not straight water anymore? Is there any little
fermenting it?
There's no little ritual that they can do to bless it and say, okay, now I can drink it? No, they have to do a physical thing to it.
Yes.
Okay.
They're people of action, not words.
Fair enough.
But I remember, because once again, it's all tied back to sacrifice. So for them, they have to ferment it. They might drink milk or fermented milk. Or non-water types of liquids. But once again, you're making all non-water kinds of liquids, but you have to process the water. Straight water could bring you life or death. And the non-believers probably don't care so much. In a way, it kind of helps their culture out too, because early on, most cultures live near rivers. They're not a road-based culture. So people tend to live right by rivers. They tend to dump their trash right into rivers, and rivers become polluted, and there are sometimes problems. If you drink out of water, you get dysentery and die. AKA, you don't go back to medieval England and drink from the Thames unless you want to die.
What is fermented water like?
Well, it depends what you ferment it with. It could be wine.
You're talking
alcohol,
like alcohol ferment. Okay. But doesn't that dehydrate you? Like what are they? My concern here is how is this people remaining hydrated?
Well, you have to remember though too, our ability to construct alcohol has greatly increased, especially over the past 3 centuries. If you were in ancient Egypt, you lived on beer as food and liquid, because the level of alcohol is actually very low in it. And typically there's a lot of sediment in it, at least in the way they did it in Egypt. And I'm thinking theirs is probably more strained out to make it more like a liquid. So they need to eat food too. But I mean, like if you're an Egyptian common worker, you were paid and lived pretty much on beer.
And this didn't dehydrate you. There was enough hydration.
Yeah, there's enough hydration.
Okay.
And it's not the levels of alcohol you'd see in beer today, not even close. Okay. If you give them a modern day Guinness, it would knock them on their butts. Same thing with wine. It took a long time of practicing, and somewhere around the 1700s, we started getting pretty good, and we've been getting better and better and better at doing it. And there also be some kinds of hard types of alcohols that go through a slightly different process that would have a higher alcoholic content, but that would be drunk in the norm of every day.
Okay. Do you want to move? Are you good with religion? Do you feel
we're actually into common food and drink at this point?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah,
I was just thinking of the can't drink straight water because of religion. So I was still thinking religion.
It's all tied together.
Okay, so we're into food.
So we're into food, and like I said, it's mainly a seafood diet. It is supplemented by common forms of meats and vegetables.
They do any farming?
They do farming. Okay. They are in settled communities. They do farming, so their primary source of food is vegetable, not meat.
Okay.
Their main meat source is seafood. However, in some areas, especially early on, there weren't a lot of communities in the areas that weren't by either rivers, lakes, or the ocean. But if you would find a village in that scenario, they probably would supplement some meat through probably cows, which they use for milk, or goats. And no, in my world, I'm too lazy. I have goats and cows, and I don't call them for fluffles.
I don't think that's necessary.
I don't think that's necessary. And the thing is, I don't want to spend my time and energy developing new livestock for people to eat.
Right. Well, for one thing, if you have something that's identical to, like, it's a cow, it's identical to a cow, just call it a cow. If you have something that's not a cow, but it serves all the purposes a cow does, and you'd like to make it a little different and rename it, then by all means, because that's not a cow.
Exactly.
But you don't feel the need to spend. There's enough.
For me, it's energy. And my world, I have a huge scope in my world. So when it comes to details like that, they don't interest me. So I don't spend my time there. And for other people, it might interest them. Oh, go all out. I don't think I'm right or wrong in it. Just for me, I don't want to call it something else.
Yeah. I mean, if you're making, a Terran equivalent of Earth, which Gardul is, then, there's no need to spend all that time and energy creating the equivalent of a cow. Yeah. It's okay just to have a cow.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong, too, with maybe throwing in another kind of herd animal that you use. But for me, I like to save it on things that I use in the stories. And for me, that stuff just doesn't interest me. So that's one of those things that, whatever floats the boat of the world builder. Woohoo. Woohoo. Okay. But I don't get too caught up into this at this point. And the reason being is sometimes I want to naturally come across things when I'm writing. And this is one of the areas too, especially like when you're writing something about dinner, then it's like, okay, as I like to have the idea so I know what needs to be there, but I don't like to have it all, like I don't have recipes and stuff.
You want to gunsling that stuff.
I do kind of gunsling that stuff. And the same thing with art, music, and dress. That will very much, I will set a tone of kind of, like a general thought. And since this is a Celtic-based society, their art, music, and dress is going to be Celtic, and that is not Irish and Scottish. That is ancient Celtic, which is an area that shared a lot, and, with linguistically, the words behind the meanings and religion to a degree, shared all across Western Europe and Ireland and Scotland. But it's really more than people think Celtic today. They think Irish and Scottish, and that's not true, especially back in the ancient world. Today, pretty much that's the Welsh, a little bit in Brittany, but it used to spread all the way out to just north of Greece. So the Celts used to be all over Europe at one point. So sort of ancient Celtic. And as time goes on, it will appear less and less. But, sort of same kind of common clothes. I would probably look when I would do writing at pictures of Celtic clothes to get an idea of what I think the clothes would look like.
Well, also, you're going to take the clothing is obviously going to be determined by the geography, the topography.
Yeah.
So, like, that's going to have an impact. If you look at, just say for sake of argument that the Syrian culture were an almost direct copy of Celtic culture, and you took a look at the Celtic clothing and it was nothing like what somebody would wear on an island, then you might be like, no, I got to change that.
Yeah, maybe they don't have some of the same goods. And that's one of the very important things too. And, when you follow the world building flow, normally you're going through this after you've developed the geography. You're looking more at the maps of where they live. And which is one of the reasons why food wise I chose seafood, because there's lots of coastline. And also they're not a road-based culture. So, how do you transport things quickly? Over water.
Yeah.
Boats. So, rivers were the roads of the ancient world.
Yeah. Well, you said in the prior episode that their boats were not great, though.
But they're fine on rivers.
So that's what it is.
They can cross open bodies of water as well.
They just weren't. I know the big thing that you had stated was they're not great for warfare. No. So
they're big, round tubs.
Okay. You don't think that they'd have... My point is if they're such a seafaring... Maybe not seafaring. That's probably not the right word.
They're not seafaring. There's a difference.
That's not the right word. If there's such a water-based culture, I would expect that their boat technology would get a little better over time.
Nope.
They didn't work on that.
No, because once again, they're based in the grounds of where they live.
Although,
And part of one of the cultural negatives are people who, feel the need to move. That would be a negative in the culture. You're moving here? Why'd you leave where you came from? Yeah. That's where your God is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The thing, no, our God came with us, remember?
Yeah. You brought your friends.
Yes,
oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I guess the thing that I'm reminded of what you're saying here, though, is kind of like Native Americans and the Inuit, where, of course, they had great boats.
Yeah.
they didn't travel across seas like Vikings, but they had great smaller boats.
Well, they went all over the Arctic Ocean. I mean, so but I mean, the boats were made for the task they used them for. And for here, it's fishing or maybe trading with the people next door to you. Probably not trading 2 towns over because you can make a little bit more. No, you're not doing that. You're going just far enough because you don't want to get too far from where your God is. And so that's sort of one of the limiting things. And that's also part of the reason why the Syrian collapse and don't really support each other very well in warfare early on when the Badrakim come, because it just doesn't fit their culture.
Fair enough. Do you feel comfortable with everything that we've covered?
A little bit for art and music here.
Okay.
Like I said, their artwork, as I said about earlier, they love geometric shapes, especially squares.
Okay.
And knotted works because, water, plant life, human life, it's all intermingled. So you'll have a lot of knot working, whether it's etched into stone or it's actual like pieces of leather or hemp. Knot working is very important to their culture. They're not huge metal workers in the fact of precious metals don't mean that much to them. Precious gems a little bit more. And music, I'm thinking they're a singing, string-based society. Once again, these are things I like to discover from the story. So that's really all I put into it. For other world builders, maybe it's some music that's inspiring you to write fantasy. You know a lot more about that at first, but these are the kind of things I like to experience along with my characters when I write.
All right.
But no, I think that is, I think that's pretty much it for the Siren Re-Envisioned, aka Mike Sucks.
I really don't think that's an appropriate title. Because it should be Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you want to get to the World Builder's task of the day?
Sure. And last time you started working on a rebuilding or building a new culture in your world, either finish it up or do another one. Cultures are fun.
And if you're building a whole world for your story, you're going to need a few of them.
Yeah. And the thing is, even if you're working on a section, they have neighbors.
Yep.
And you need a lot less detail if you're writing about neighbors that aren't in the story, but it gives some frame of reference for them to think about the neighbors. If the neighbors get mentioned in the book, what does this culture think about them? And the more you use them, the more detail you need.
Yeah. And it may seem an obvious concept, but I feel like some people who are not, like if you're a newer world builder, this might be a new idea. I don't think it's probably not a new idea to anybody that really listens to the show. But if you're telling a story and the entirety of that story takes place in a single house, as the story writer, as the crafter of the world that takes place, everything in that house, you still need to know what's outside the house. You still need to know what's around the house most of the time. Yeah. Sometimes you can write a story where it's so self-contained you don't need to know all that stuff. It doesn't matter where the house is.
The house was taken off and planted on the moon.
It could be, right. But if you're going to write a story about someone who lives in a city and they travel throughout the city, you need to know what that city's like, and you need to know generally what's around it, and you need to know, like for Jeff's world, Jeff not only needs to know what's going on in the world and the cultures that happen and the people that are dealing with, he needs to know how the stars in the sky move, because that affects the religions of the people on the planet. So he doesn't just need to know how the people deal with the river and the mountain nearby. He needs to know the continent, the ocean movements, the planetary movements, and the stars in the sky. It's a much bigger scope. So it's a lot more to plan.
And the moon.
Do you have to do all that? No. But you no matter what the scope of your story, you're going to need to know what's going on outside the story, because that just impacts it. It makes it more real. The listener, the reader, the game player, they don't need to know all that. Like, I remember when I was creating a campaign for a game that I was working on, and that was when I was first getting into world building, and I was like, oh my gosh, for me to tell this story, I need to know this whole city, even though I only plan on them being in A and B, but if they decide not to go to A and B and they want to go somewhere else in the city, I need to know where to take them. Yeah. So it was just like, it was a little overwhelming to realize.
A great thing to think about here is how does Lord of the Rings change? The hobbits in general don't go anywhere. They don't do much. And they kind of look freakishly at the few hobbits who do venture out. So how does the culture change? Maybe we'll do a what if at some point. But
a Hobbit what if?
Yeah. What if, basically during the time of the Hobbit, the original Hobbit, Bilbo's thinking about going and he's being annoyed by dwarfs. And all of a sudden, the Mongol horde moves into Bree and takes Bree. Yes, from Earth. They transport through time and space. The entirety of the Mongol horde under Genghis Khan is now across the river. Does that change the Hobbit culture? Yes.
If it doesn't flat annihilate it.
Well,
it's not like they were a warring people.
I was going to say, that might be the next thing, but the thing is you start to scramble because there's new stimulus. Mm-hmm. And maybe by the time Gandalf shows up with the dwarfs, Genghis is taken over and you have to deal with his cousin Bob if you want to go kill Sauron. And that's not as pleasant.
Mm-hmm. But might be easier.
But the fire... There's a dragon? Horde! Attack! It would completely change the entire
I said Sauron, not dragon. We'll kill him too.
There's Gondor in the way? Oh, we'll sweep through there as well.
There's no need for that. Nice dig. We're taking it. So what about the real world task of the day?
Start prepping for this new year, because even though this is December 18th for us, you're hearing this, I think it's January 3rd or 4th. The first Sunday of January is when this is getting posted. So the new year is starting, and think about it. Because
what do you want to accomplish this year?
What do you want to accomplish this year? And not just, in life, but obviously focusing a little bit more in on writing and world building and those kind of things, which actually really kind of leads us right into the teas.
Yeah. Before you get to the teas, my wife and I like to do is we'll actually write down a list of things that we want to do this year. Like, what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? Mm-hmm. Do we want to go on little trips? Mm-hmm. Do we want to go on some little adventure that we haven't yet before? And we'll write them down year by year and be like, this is what we're going to try to do this year.
Michael Hyatt actually has this course called Best Year Ever, which is, I think, a really good thing for people to take at least once. And it works really well with spouses. But when he talks about goal setting, it's like, I think you want a small number of goals, but and like Michael Hyatt is a business-based internet guy. So most people who are interacting with him, they want to be web entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, so have like 3 for work, but then you need 3 for home. And if you're spiritual, you need 3 for that. So, it's like,
well, I like that.
When you plan your goals, and we'll talk about this in the next episode.
Okay.
We're talking about goals and the word of the year and how that should apply to writers. So keep this all in mind, but have goals, and they shouldn't be just focused, unless you're single and you don't want to eat. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be just focused on writing. But, how do we balance ourselves to either get the new world done for your friends, or to write the story to try and get published, or to write the story to publish yourself? How do we structure a new year? And then the word of the year, well, you'll learn more about that next time.
Before we close it down, there is 2 things that I want to cover. I want you to pimp your book.
The Steward's Son?
The Steward's Son. Do you know release date yet?
Next year.
Next year. So you don't have a date yet.
Hopefully early.
Hopefully early, like first quarter is your goal?
Hopefully no later than the end of the first quarter.
Okay. I also want to say, if you haven't noticed, Star Wars has gotten big in the media again. You may have seen a thing or two.
Really? There's a new Star Wars?
New Star Wars. If you would like to go to Amazon to get your Star Wars stuff, go to www.garduel.com/Amazon. It'll take you right to Amazon. You'll be able to get all the goods and fresh, hot stuff that you need, but it helps the show. It's not going to change your prices, so it won't increase your prices at all, but it will help the show to help us keep giving you wonderful and thought-out content such as this.
Actually, Kristen just texted me and said, since Mike pimped out the show, I can't say the episodes Mike sucks anymore. So I guess it's over.
Because I don't. I mean, look, anyone that's going to see Star Wars tonight doesn't suck. I think some of the people, like the guy across the table from me, who's not going to see Star Wars tonight, who's not, let me repeat that, going to see Star Wars tonight, not going to. He might suck.
I have more important things to do. All right. Until next time.
And as always, make sure to go to garduel.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builder's Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us in this episode of the World Builder's Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Garduel.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.